The blade
You
kissed her
cannot
throat,
escape your fate.
cold silver
Please, I
against
beg
warm
you.
flesh.
Your fear is
The
delicious.
entire
No
assembly
more,
of Moon
please.
Hollow Dominion held its breath, 1,000 souls waiting for their vampire king to give the final command. But Draven Nightshade's hand froze, trembling. Something ancient and primal tore through his consciousness with a single word that shattered everything he thought he knew about himself, about fate, about the impossible. Mate. Astrid Thornfield knelt in the center of the Crimson Court wrists, bound with silver-laced rope that seared her skin like acid. Each breath sent fresh agony through her ribs, where the guards had beaten her after dragging her from the dungeons. Her golden hair, once carefully braided, now hung in matted tangles crusted with dried blood. She didn't beg, didn't weep. Even facing death, her amber eyes remained defiant, fixed on the horizon beyond the crowd of sneering faces. She wouldn't give them her tears, not for something she didn't do. Vampire King Draven approached through the parted assembly, and every creature, vampire and werewolf alike, fell silent. He moved with predatory grace, dark hair pulled back from a face carved from marble and grief. His eyes, once warm amber that could soften with laughter, now glowed red with vampire rage, cold as winter stone. They swept over her without recognition. To him, she was nothing. An Omega who had murdered his betrothed, a wolf who had destroyed the fragile peace between their kinds. His voice carried across the courtyard, each word a hammer blow against her soul. Astrid Thornfield, you stand accused of murdering Isolde Thornfield, daughter of the Werewolf Council, my chosen mate, the bridge between vampire and wolf. He paused and something flickered across his perfect features, pain raw and bleeding. You were found over her body, her blood on your hands, the murder weapon in your grasp. His jaw clenched. For this crime, the laws of both our kinds demand your life. The executioner stepped forward. Chael Stormborn was a mountain of muscle and scar tissue, his silver blade gleaming red in the torchlight. He had performed 17 executions in his 3 centuries of service. This would be his 18th. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. She wanted to scream her innocence one more time. But what was the point? No one had listened during the trial. No one had questioned why an Omega with no motive, no history of violence would murder the kindest soul in the entire Dominion. Isolde had been the only high-ranking wolf who had ever treated her with basic decency, who had stopped the others from beating her for daring to enter the main hall, who had brought her food when the pack forgot to feed the Omegas, who had smiled at her like she was worth something. Chael's massive hand gripped her hair, yanking her head back to expose her throat. The blade rose, catching the last rays of dying sunlight. Time crystallized, slowed. Draven raised his hand. The signal. The blade descended and stopped, 1 inch from her skin. Draven's hand had shot out with inhuman speed, catching Chael's wrist in an iron grip. The Vampire King's entire body had gone rigid, his eyes blown wide with something between shock and agony. Inside his chest, his vampire nature erupted. Mate, 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 mate. The word tore through his consciousness like claws through flesh, primal and absolute and impossible. Vampires didn't have fated mates. That was werewolf magic, werewolf destiny. He had lived 280 years without ever feeling this pull, this knowing, this devastating certainty. His nostrils flared, catching her scent fully for the first time. Not the blood and fear coating her like a shroud, but beneath it. Wild orchid and midnight rain, and something uniquely, devastatingly hers. Every instinct screamed one impossible truth. This woman he was about to execute, this Magaga accused of murdering his betrothed, was his fated mate. The assembly erupted into chaos. Werewolves snarled, vampires hissed, voices rising in confusion and fury. Elder Cornelius Blackwood's weathered face twisted with rage as he pushed through the crowd, his silver council robes billowing. My king, what is the meaning of this? Draven couldn't speak, couldn't move. His hand still gripped Chael's wrist, holding the blade frozen in place. His eyes locked with Astrid's, and he watched it happen. Watched her confusion shift to awareness. Watched her amber eyes flood with recognition. Then horror. Then something raw and tortured that made his dead heart clench. She felt it too. The pull. The knowing. Something fundamental shifting in the space between them, like the world tilting on its axis and nothing would ever be right again. For one heartbeat, suspended in eternity, they were the only 2 souls in existence. Then the moment shattered. My king. Elder Cornelius's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Complete the execution. The law is clear. The crowd stirred confused murmurs rippling outward like waves. Werewolves and vampires who had gathered to witness justice now witnessed something they couldn't name, couldn't understand. Draven stood frozen, his vampire nature howling to protect her, his duty demanding her death, every fiber of his being screaming contradictions that threatened to tear him apart. King Draven. Cornelius's voice hardened, taking on the edge of challenge. The law demands she pay for her crime. Your personal feelings cannot interfere with justice. Personal feelings, as if this was something as simple as preference, as casual as desire. This was fate, destiny. The rarest magic in all the world reaching across species that shouldn't be compatible, binding him to the one woman he was sworn to kill. Draven's jaw clenched so hard his fangs cut into his lower lip. When he spoke, his voice was granite laced with steel. Take her to the tower. Chaos erupted. You cannot. Cornelius's face flushed crimson. The law demands. Draven's alpha command, amplified by 3 centuries of vampire power, rolled over them like thunder. Silence. Every werewolf in the courtyard dropped their eyes, submitted. Even the vampires bound to him by blood and oath felt the weight of his authority pressing down. In the ringing quiet that followed, Draven's voice was deadly calm. I will investigate further. If additional evidence supports her guilt beyond question, she dies. Until then, she lives. Kale released Astrid's hair. Guards hauled her to her feet, silver burning her wrists, leaving marks that would scar. As they dragged her toward the tower that served as the Dominion's high-security prison, she twisted back, searching for Draven's face. He stood like a statue carved from ice and shadow, watching her disappear into darkness. His fists clenched at his sides. His eyes returned to their normal amber, burned with an intensity that made her breath catch even through her fear. She didn't understand why she was still breathing. Didn't understand the connection that had crackled between them like lightning. But something had changed. Something neither of them could name yet. Something that terrified them both. Hours later, alone in his private chambers, Draven pressed his forehead against the cold stone wall as his vampire nature clawed at his insides, desperate to reach their mate. Their mate who had murdered his betrothed. Their mate whose execution he had stopped 1 inch from her throat. Their mate he might still have to kill. The chambers were opulent, decorated with 5 centuries of collected treasures, but they felt like a tomb. He had stood in this room with Isolde just 8 days ago, discussing the details of their upcoming bonding ceremony, the alliance it would forge, the peace it would secure. She had smiled at him with genuine warmth, even though they both knew their match was political, not romantic. We'll make it work, she had said. We'll build something good together. And now she was dead, murdered, and every fiber of his being screamed that the woman accused of killing her was innocent. A knock at the door pulled him from his spiral. Enter. Kale stepped inside his massive frame, somehow managing to look cautious. In 300 years of service, the vampire warrior had learned to read Draven's moods with uncanny accuracy. My king, the prisoner is secured in the tower. Thalia Ravencroft has treated her injuries. Draven's head snapped up. I gave no such order. Kale's expression remained carefully neutral. Thalia claimed she was checking the structural integrity of the tower walls. For rats, diseased rats, very dangerous, might need healing. Despite everything, Draven felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Thalia, the half-vampire, half-werewolf healer who served the Dominion with fierce loyalty, had never been good at subtlety. The rats, my king. Draven turned back to the window, staring out at the tower where Astrid was imprisoned. What did Thalia tell you about the prisoner's condition? Severe silver poisoning, burns on both wrists, 3 cracked ribs, defensive wounds on her forearms, old bruises, weeks old from previous beatings. Kale paused. My king, if he untreated the silver poisoning, would have killed her within 3 days. And you allowed Thalia to treat her. You didn't stop me, my king. Draven's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No, I didn't. He dismissed Kyle with a wave, then stood alone in the darkness, fighting a war with himself. Every instinct screamed to go to her, to protect her, to claim her. But duty, justice, the law, Isolde deserved justice. And if Astrid truly was guilty, then the mate bond was nothing but a cruel twist of fate binding him to a murderer. He had to know the truth. The tower smelled of old stone and silver. Astrid sat in the corner of her cell, knees drawn to her chest, bandages wrapped around her wrists where Thalia had treated the burns. The hybrid healer had worked in silence, her touch gentle, her expression unreadable. No one else had come. No guards brought food or water. They pretended she didn't exist. Easier to execute someone you haven't looked in the eye. Astrid didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isolde's body sprawled across her cottage floor, blood pooling beneath golden hair so similar to her own. eyes staring at nothing empty of the warmth and kindness that had defined her. Astrid had tried to save her, pressed her hands against the wounds, begging her to hold on, getting covered in blood before she realized Isolde was already gone, already cold. That's when Damon had burst through the door with the guards. That's when her life had ended. Death would come eventually. Today's delay only prolonged the inevitable. Whatever had stopped Draven's hand at the execution guilt, maybe or momentary hesitation wouldn't last. By tomorrow she would be dead. She almost preferred it. At least then the pain would stop. Footsteps echoed up the tower stairs. Too heavy for guards. Too measured. Too powerful. Vampire. Strid didn't move as Draven appeared beyond the iron bars, still dressed in his formal execution clothes, dark fabric making him look like shadow, given form. His amber eyes found her in the darkness, glowing faintly with that inner light vampires carried. For a long moment neither spoke. The mate bond hummed between them, a living thing that made her skin tingle despite the iron and silver surrounding them. Even through the barrier she could feel it. The pull, the knowing, the absolute certainty that this man was meant for her and she for him. Even though she had supposedly killed the woman he loved. Even though he was a vampire king and she was nothing. "Why were you at your cottage?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but something beneath it vibrated with tension. Astrid kept her gaze fixed on the far wall. "I live there. Lived there." Isolde was found dead inside. "You were covered in her blood." "I tried to save her." The words tasted like ash. "I came home and found her dying. I tried to stop the bleeding, but there was so much blood, and she was already—" Her voice cracked. "The murder weapon was in your hand." "I picked it up." She finally looked at him. Amber eyes meeting amber. "I didn't know what else to do. I was panicking. And then Damon burst in with the guards and—" She stopped, took a breath. "I didn't kill her. I know you won't believe me. No one does, but I didn't." Draven's fingers wrapped around the bars. His vampire nature was destroying him from the inside, howling that she was innocent, that she needed protection, not imprisonment. But the evidence was damning. He had seen the scene himself 3 days ago when they first brought him to investigate. Isolde's body in the center of the small cottage, throat torn open. Astrid kneeling beside her, hands red to the elbows, that silver dagger clutched in shaking fingers. Open and shut. Except. "The wounds," he said slowly. "They were ragged. Torn." Astrid's eyes snapped to his sudden hope flickering across her face like candlelight. "The weapon they found in your hands was a silver dagger. Clean blade. Sharp edge." His brow furrowed, ancient mind, working through the evidence with the precision of centuries. But Isolde's throat looked like it had been ripped by claws, not cut by a blade. "I tried to tell them." Astrid's voice broke on the words, desperation bleeding through. "No one would listen. I'm just an Omega. My word means nothing." Draven stepped closer to the bars and his vampire nature surged forward, desperate for contact, for her scent, for anything. The bond was agony, being this close and not touching, not claiming, not protecting. "You're hurt," he said, noticing the bandages properly for the first time. Without thinking, he reached through the bars. Their skin made contact. The mate bond slammed through them both like lightning. Every nerve ending ignited, every sense heightened, every emotion amplified, until the world narrowed to just this, just them, just the devastating certainty of belonging. Astrid gasped. Draven's eyes went wide, his vampire nature roaring in triumph, even as something deeper ignited in his chest. Recognition. Completion. Home. His hand cupped her cheek thumb, brushing away dried blood with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about vampires. His touch was cool, but not cold, strong, but not harsh. For one perfect moment, she leaned into it. Then reality crashed back. Astrid flinched away violently, scrambling backward until her spine hit the far wall. The rejection, her fear of him, made his vampire nature howl in anguish, made something in his chest crack and bleed. Draven pulled his hand back like he'd been burned, something breaking inside him at the terror in her eyes. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "You were going to kill me 6 hours ago." Fair point. Footsteps approached from below, lighter this time. Draven melted into the shadows as a figure rounded the corner, carrying a leather medical bag. Thalia Ravencroft froze when she saw him. Her unique eyes, one amber, like a wolf, one red, like a vampire, widened in panic. "My king." "I was just—" She glanced at the medical supplies, then at Astrid, then back at Draven, checking on the structural integrity of the tower walls. "For rats, diseased rats, very dangerous. Might need healing, the rats I mean." Draven raised an eyebrow. "You're treating her." Talia's shoulders sagged. "She has silver poisoning. If untreated, she'll die before any trial, before any truth can be found. The elders won't approve medical care for a condemned prisoner. The elders aren't here. Talia lifted her chin, her hybrid nature giving her courage that few others possessed. And you didn't stop me. Draven studied her for a long moment, this healer who had served him faithfully for decades, who walked between worlds just as precariously as he now found himself walking between duty and destiny. You have 10 minutes. As Thalia rushed to Astrid's cell, Draven turned to leave. At the tower entrance, he paused without looking back. Tomorrow, I'll review the evidence again. All of it. He didn't wait for a response. The evidence room was cold and clinical. Draven stood before the table where they had laid out everything recovered from the scene, Kale silent at his side. Isolde's torn dress crusted with dried blood. The silver dagger clean now, but still bearing traces of her scent. Astrid's blood-stained tunic. Witness statements. Guard reports and photographs. Dozens of them capturing the scene from every angle. Draven picked up one image, studying it with vampire precision. Isolde's body positioned in the center of the cottage floor. The blood pool beneath her still wet when this was taken. Her throat torn open. Show me the autopsy report. Kael produced a leather folder. Draven read it once, then again, his ancient mind catching details that human investigators would miss. She died from a silver blade through the heart. Single thrust precise, delivered by someone with knowledge of anatomy. He looked up. But these wounds on her throat, claw marks, Kael confirmed, made by werewolf claws in shifted form. Deep lacerations, but not the killing blow. So someone clawed her throat, then stabbed her through the heart with silver. It appears so, my king. Draven set down the report, mind racing. That's 2 different attacks, 2 different weapons, 2 different methods. Or, Kael said carefully, one attacker using multiple methods to ensure death. Why a silver blade through the heart is instant death for a werewolf. Why bother with the claws? Kael had no answer. Draven moved to the evidence bags containing Astrid's clothing, her tunic torn and bloody. He opened the bag, breathing deep, sorting through the layers of scent with vampire precision. Blood, fear, pain. But beneath that, something else. There's werewolf blood on this tunic that isn't Isolde's. Kael's head snapped up. What? The scent is different. Isolde's blood smells like roses and morning dew. This other blood, he inhaled again. Pine and iron, male. Werewolf, but not Isolde. Astrid's own blood. She's female, this is male. Understanding dawned in Kael's ancient eyes. She was bleeding before she found Isolde. She was attacked, Draven said slowly, pieces falling into place. Someone attacked her in the forest, wounded her. She escaped and ran home for medical supplies. And found Isolde's body already waiting. A setup. A perfect setup. Draven's hands clenched into fists. Someone attacked Astrid, likely hoping to kill her. When she escaped, they pivoted. Killed Isolde, staged the body in Astrid's cottage, waited for her to return and incriminate herself. But why frame an Omega? What possible motive? That, Draven said darkly, is what we're going to find out. Dawn was breaking when Draven climbed the tower stairs again. He found Astrid sitting against the wall, the bandages on her wrists fresh from Thalia's second visit. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady when she met his. Tell me about the attack, he said without preamble. The one before you found Isolde. Every detail. Astrid blinked, surprised. Then slowly she began to speak. I was gathering herbs in the forest, wolfsbane and silver root for Thalia. She pays me sometimes to collect them, since I'm immune to the worst effects. She wrapped her arms around herself, remembering. I was walking home through the old growth section when someone grabbed me from behind. Claws out. They were wearing a hood. I couldn't see their face. Male or female? Male. Heavy, strong. He smelled like pine and old blood. She shuddered. We fought. I'm not trained, but I was terrified. I got away, but I was hurt. Bleeding badly. I ran to my cottage because I keep medical supplies there. But when I opened the door, her voice broke. Draven waited patient. Isolde was already dead. There was so much blood. I dropped to my knees beside her, trying to find a pulse pressing on the wound. And that's when I saw the dagger on the floor. I picked it up. I don't even know why. I was in shock. And then Damon kicked the door open with the guards. He shouted murderer before he even looked at me, like he knew exactly what he would find. Draven's jaw clenched. How fast did they arrive? Too fast. Her eyes widened as the realization hit her fully. He was already there, right outside, like he was waiting for me to pick up the weapon. You were framed perfectly, Draven said quietly. Attacked in the forest to get your blood on your clothes and wounds on your body. Then Isolde's body placed in your home. The weapon positioned where you would naturally pick it up. And Damon waiting outside to discover you at the perfect moment. Astrid stared at him. You believe me. 3 simple words, but they carried the weight of everything. Every accusation she had endured, every beating, every moment of being told she was lying, that she was a monster, that she deserved death. And here was the Vampire King, the most powerful being in Moonhollow Dominion, the man whose betrothed she had supposedly murdered, saying he believed her. Her composure, held together through torture and false accusations and days of expecting death, shattered completely. A sob tore from her throat, then another. She pressed her hands over her face as tears she had refused to shed finally broke free. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. Draven didn't hesitate. He opened the cell door with keys he shouldn't have had, stepped inside and pulled her against his chest. She should have resisted, should have pulled away. But she was so tired of being strong, so exhausted from carrying the weight of false guilt. His arms wrapped around her, solid and cool and safe. For the first time in 7 days, she let herself break. I've got you, he murmured against her hair, his vampire nature singing with rightness at finally holding their mate. I've got you. The connection between them pulsed with warmth, no longer fighting it, no longer afraid. Just 2 souls recognizing each other in the darkness. When her tears finally subsided, Draven pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. His thumb brushed away the wetness from her cheeks with devastating gentleness. You're being moved to a guarded chamber in the East Wing, not as a prisoner, as a witness under protection. The elders will never allow. Let me worry about the elders. His amber eyes burned with intensity. Right now, we have a murderer to catch. By midday, Draven had found his witness. Little Cora Brightwater was 7 years old, all wide eyes and nervous energy. She had been playing near the Omega cottages when it happened, and her mother had kept her hidden ever since, terrified of retribution. Draven knelt before her in her family's modest home, making himself smaller, less frightening. Cora, I need you to tell me what you saw. I promise no one will hurt you for telling the truth. The little girl looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. I saw a man leaving Miss Astrid's cottage. Cora whispered, small hands twisting in her dress. He was running fast. What did he look like? Big, like the warriors. He had dark hair and a scar here. She touched her jaw. Draven's blood ran cold. Damon Thornfield, Isolde's brother, a scar along his jaw from a training accident years ago. You're very brave, Cora. Thank you. As he stood to leave, the child's mother caught his arm. My king, please. He came here yesterday, asked if Cora had seen anything. When I said no, he looked at her for a long time. Then he smiled and said it was good that children knew how to keep quiet. A threat, thinly veiled, but a threat nonetheless. Draven's eyes flashed red for just a moment. He won't touch her. You have my word. Outside, Kyle was waiting. My king, we have a problem. Damon? He's requesting audience, says he wants to volunteer for additional duty guarding the prisoner. Draven's jaw clenched. Of course he does. Damon Thornfield was everything a werewolf warrior should be. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy charm that made people trust him. His dark hair was tied back, his council robes immaculate. The scar along his jaw only added to his rugged appeal. He smiled as Draven entered the council chamber. My king, I heard you're investigating further. I want to help ensure my sister gets justice. I'd like to volunteer to guard the prisoner. Make sure she doesn't hurt anyone else. That won't be necessary. I insist. Damon's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. After all, my sister deserves justice. I want to make sure the investigation is thorough. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Thorough meant ensuring Astrid died one way or another. Draven stepped closer, using every inch of his height and centuries of power to make his position clear. I said, no, Damon. Stand down. For just a moment, Damon's mask slipped. Rage flashed across his face, raw and ugly. Then he forced the smile back into place. Of course, my king, I defer to your wisdom. But his eyes promised this wasn't over. After Damon left, Elder Cornelius appeared from the shadows. The old werewolf's face was grave, his silver council robes pristine. My king, the council is growing restless. Every day that Omega lives, it looks like weakness, like you're controlled by base instinct rather than law. I'm investigating discrepancies in the evidence. There are no discrepancies. She was caught over the body weapon in hand. You're seeing what you want to see because your vampire nature caught her scent. Cornelius's expression hardened. Execute her tomorrow or the council will question whether you're fit to lead. Draven's eyes flashed red. Are you threatening me, Elder? I'm advising you, my king. The Dominion cannot be ruled by a vampire who puts his personal desires above justice. If you cannot do your duty, perhaps someone else should. The challenge was clear. Execute Astrid or face a coup. Cornelius left without waiting for dismissal, and Draven stood alone in the council chamber, fury and frustration warring inside him. That night, Draven entered the East Wing carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. The guards loyal to him personally wisely made themselves scarce. Astrid stood when she saw him no longer in the blood-stained rags, but in simple, clean clothes that Talia had provided. The chamber was comfortable with a real bed, a window overlooking the gardens, and no iron bars. But she was still a prisoner, and they both knew it. I brought food, Draven said, unwrapping fresh bread, roasted meat, and cheese. Real food. Astrid's eyes widened. Why? He passed the plate through the doorway and their fingers brushed. Just for a heartbeat, that current raced between them again, making her skin warm. Astrid's breath caught, but this time she didn't pull away. Because my vampire nature won't let me abandon you, Draven said quietly, and maybe it's smarter than I am. She took the food with trembling hands. I didn't kill her. I know. 2 words, simple, certain. Astrid's eyes filled with tears. Solda was kind to me. Once, when the other high-ranking wolves were beating me for entering the main hall to deliver herbs, she stopped them, told them I had every right to walk anywhere in the Dominion. She was the only one who ever treated me like I was worth something. Tell me about that day, everything you remember. Astrid's voice was soft but steady. I had been gathering herbs in the forest, wolfsbane for Thalia's potions. On my way home, someone attacked me from behind. I fought back, got away, but I was bleeding. I ran to my cottage for supplies and found her. Her voice broke. Found her there, already dead. I didn't know what to do. I tried to help her, and then Damon burst in with the guards. Damon was very fast, Draven said carefully, like he knew exactly where to look. Astrid's eyes widened. He was waiting for me. Before Draven could respond, footsteps thundered down the corridor. Damon appeared, his face twisted with false concern. My king, I must protest. The prisoner shouldn't be fed like an honored guest while my sister's body lies cold in the crypt. Draven's voice dropped to lethal quiet. I gave you an order to stand down, Damon. Or do you have trouble following commands? Damon's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, it looked like he might challenge right there in the corridor. Then he forced his expression into something resembling respect. Of course not, my king. Just concerned about propriety. Your concern is noted. Now leave. After Damon stalked away, Draven turned back to Astrid. The fear in her eyes had shifted to something else. Something that looked almost like trust. He killed her, Astrid whispered. His own sister. I know, Draven said quietly, and I'm going to prove it. The bond between them thrummed with certainty, no longer a curse but a promise. He would find the truth. He would protect her. He would stand between her and every threat, even if it cost him his crown. Because fate had chosen her for him, and he would not fail her. Not again. The next morning, Draven stood in the forbidden archives, Thalia and Kale at his side. Row upon row of ledgers stretched into shadow, each containing bloodline records of every wolf born into the Dominion for 500 years. Dust motes danced in the lamplight. The smell of old parchment and leather filled the air. Every legitimate wolf, anyway. It was Thalia who discovered it. Hidden inside a hollowed-out ledger marked Census Records year 1247. Her hybrid fingers finding the secret compartment that others had missed. A journal, leather-bound small enough to conceal, filled with Isolde's elegant script. Draven's hands trembled as he read. Found discrepancy in Omega registration records. Female child no parents listed appeared suddenly 15 years ago. Name Astrid Thornfield. No bloodline documentation whatsoever. Elder Cornelius personally marked her as Omega rank despite standard protocol requiring bloodline verification for all new pack members. The entry continued, dated 3 weeks before Isolde's death. Cross-referenced with sealed historical records. Original true alpha line, the Moonshadow dynasty, supposedly eliminated in the coup of 1523. Official records claim total extinction, but rumors persist. Whispers of the youngest daughter escaping. Descendants would have gone into hiding, concealed their nature, survived in shadows. Draven's blood ran cold as he turned the page. Requested DNA comparison from healer Thalia using Astrid's medical records and preserved moonshadow samples from the royal crypt. Results pending. His fingers found the final entry dated 1 week before her death. Results confirm. Astrid Thornfield is direct descendant of Moonshadow dynasty. She is the true heir. Have requested meeting with Damon to discuss how to safely reveal this without endangering Astrid. He suggested we meet privately at the Omega cottages to avoid council interference. We'll meet him tomorrow evening. The entry ended there, because that's where Damon had killed her. Thalia's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. Mother of wolves. Kale stood frozen, his ancient warrior's face pale. The true heir lives. Draven's world tilted on its axis, the Moonshadow dynasty. The original rulers of all werewolf packs in this territory. The bloodline that had held power for 1,000 years before the coup, before the council system, before everything changed. They had believed the line extinct, dead, erased from history, but it wasn't extinct. It had been hiding in plain sight, marked as Omega, powerless and voiceless, surviving in the only way it could. And Damon had discovered the truth, had killed his own sister to keep it buried. If the Dominion learns of this, Kale started, everything changes, Draven finished. The Werewolf Council's power structure, the carefully balanced peace between vampires and wolves. 5 centuries of assumed legitimacy built on the belief that the true line was gone. And Astrid, sweet, terrified Astrid, who had spent her entire life being told she was nothing, being beaten and starved and treated as less than. She was the rightful alpha of every werewolf in Moonhollow. His mate was not just innocent. She was royalty. That evening he found her in the East Wing chamber, staring out the window at the moon. She turned as he entered, and something in his expression made her tense. What did you find? Draven set the journal on the table between them, his hands not quite steady. Read it. He watched her face as she absorbed Isolde's words, watched shock bloom into disbelief, then into something like grief. No. She shook her head, blonde hair catching the lamplight. That's impossible. I'm Omega. I've always been... You've always been lied to. Draven's voice was gentle, despite the fury burning in his chest. Fury at everyone who had hurt her, diminished her, made her believe she was worthless. Your ancestors survived the coup by hiding, by accepting the lowest rank to avoid detection. The Moonshadow dynasty. Astrid's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, journal clutched in trembling hands. That would make me the rightful alpha of the Werewolf Council. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Your council, Astrid whispered, meeting his eyes. The current power structure. It exists because my family was thought dead. Yes. If this becomes known, everything you've built wasn't mine to build, Draven said quietly. He crossed to her, crouching so they were eye level, taking her hands in his. The council took power by default, not by right. They've ruled well enough, I believe. But if the true line lives, then the truth deserves to be known. I don't know how to be alpha. Her voice broke on the words. I've spent my whole life being told I'm nothing. Less than nothing. I don't even know how to shift properly. You survived torture and false accusation with your head held high. You protected Isolde's memory even when everyone believed you killed her. You stood in that courtyard facing death, and you didn't beg. His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. You have more strength than most warriors I've known in 3 centuries. But the question isn't whether you can be Alpha, Astrid. It's whether you choose to be. She met his eyes, and something shifted in her gaze. Not confidence yet, but the beginning of it. A spark of recognition of her own worth, buried deep but starting to surface. Damon knows, she said quietly. That's why he killed Isolde. That's why he wants me dead. Yes, and he's running out of time. As if summoned by his name, shouts erupted from the courtyard below. Draven moved to the window and cursed. Damon stood in the center of the training grounds, surrounded by a dozen warriors loyal to him. His voice carried clearly in the night air, pitched to reach every corner of the Dominion. Our king has been bewitched by the murderer. He protects her, feeds her, moves her from prison to honored chambers. The mate bond has made him weak, blind to justice. More wolves were gathering, listening. He refuses to execute the Omega who killed his own betrothed, who destroyed our alliance, who spilled noble blood. What kind of leader chooses a murderer over his people? Astrid stood beside Draven, her face pale. He's forcing your hand. Either I execute you to prove I'm not compromised, or he challenges you for the throne. She looked up at him, amber eyes wide. And if he wins, I die regardless. Draven's jaw clenched. Below, Damon's eyes found their window. Even from this distance, Draven could see the cold calculation in them. The game was accelerating, and only one of them would survive it. The council chamber was packed beyond capacity when they convened at dawn. Every elder, every high-ranking wolf, every family was standing, had crowded into the ancient hall. Damon had called an emergency session, and no one wanted to miss what promised to be either a political execution or a coup. Draven entered first alone, his vampire power filling the space like dark water. He had lived through 5 centuries of politics, and he knew how to command a room. Then Astrid entered behind him. The chamber fell silent. She wore simple clothes, nothing grand or ceremonial. But Draven had marked her properly the night before. Ritual ink and sacred ash traced across her throat in the pattern of mate bonding, the mark that announced to every supernatural creature that she was claimed, protected. His. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Scandalous, before she's even cleared. Bewitched, I told you. The vampire has lost his mind. Damon stood at the center of the chamber, his expression a mask of righteous fury. King Draven, you force us to this action. For over a week, you've delayed justice for my sister's murderer. You've moved her from prisoner to honored guest. And now, he gestured to Astrid's throat. Now you've mate-marked her. This is proof that the bond has compromised your judgment. Elder Cornelius stepped forward, his aged face grave. King Draven, this council formally questions your fitness to lead. Present your defense. Draven's voice carried through the chamber with the weight of centuries. I present evidence that Astrid Thornfield was framed for a murder she didn't commit. He laid out everything methodically. The blood evidence showing Astrid was attacked before finding Isolde. The witness testimony from young Cora Brightwater, who saw someone leaving the cottage. The discrepancies between Isolde's wounds and the suspected weapon. Furthermore, Draven continued, his amber eyes sweeping the assembly. The Dominion's historian died investigating bloodline records just 1 week before Isolde's murder. 7 Omegas with archive access have died under suspicious circumstances in the past 15 years. This isn't isolated. This is a pattern. One of Damon's allies, a grizzled warrior named Finn Blackpaw, stood. Convenient theories, but where's proof the girl was found over the body with the weapon in hand? Because she was meant to be, Draven shot back. Someone staged it perfectly. Who? Damon demanded, his voice ringing with false innocence. Show us this mysterious killer, my king. Or admit that you're protecting a murderer because your vampire nature caught her scent. The chamber erupted in arguments. Traditional wolves shouted about honor and justice. Younger pack members defended Astrid, uncertainty in their voices. Chaos threatened to consume everything. Then Elder Cornelius called for order, his staff striking the stone floor like thunder. The accused may speak in her defense. Every eye turned to Astrid. She had never addressed a council before. Omegas didn't speak in formal settings. They barely spoke above whispers, trained from childhood to know their place, to stay silent, to accept whatever judgment was handed down. Her legs trembled as she stepped forward. Then she felt it. Draven's presence behind her, solid and unwavering. The mate bond humming with encouragement. The weight of Isolde's journal in her pocket, proof of a truth that could change everything. I didn't kill Isolde Thornfield. Her voice started soft but steady. She was kind to me when no one else was. She stopped others from hurting me. She brought me food when the pack forgot to feed the Omegas. Why would I murder the only person who treated me like I mattered? She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes instead of dropping her gaze as she'd been taught for 22 years. I know I'm Omega. I know my voice doesn't carry weight here. But I'm telling you the truth. Her voice grew stronger, fed by every injustice she'd endured, every beating, every moment of being told she was worthless. Someone attacked me in the forest. Someone staged Isolde's body in my cottage. Someone wanted both of us dead. Isolde permanently. Me by execution. Finn Blackpaw challenged, and we're supposed to believe you over evidence. Astrid's chin lifted, and for the first time in her life, she looked like what she was. Royalty hidden beneath layers of conditioning and fear. You're supposed to ask why an Omega with nothing to gain would risk everything to kill a high-rank wolf who protected her. You're supposed to question why the evidence is too perfect. You're supposed to demand actual justice instead of convenient closure. The chamber went silent. Several wolves shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, they weren't seeing a cowering Omega. They were seeing someone who stood with quiet power, who demanded to be heard, who refused to bow beneath false accusations. Someone who looked remarkably like an alpha. Elder Cornelius called for the vote, all in favor of removing King Draven for compromised judgment. Hands rose. Too many hands. Astrid's heart sank. She counted them, watched Damon's supporters show themselves. 12 votes for removal, all opposed. More hands, not enough. The count was close, dangerously close. By a margin of 6 votes, Cornelius announced, his voice carefully neutral. King Draven maintains his position. Damon Thornfield, your challenge is denied. Damon's face darkened with barely controlled rage. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and the fury beneath was ugly and raw. Then he forced a bow, stiff and minimal. Of course, Elder, I defer to the council's wisdom. But as the chamber emptied, Astrid caught his expression when he thought no one was watching. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. Over the next 3 days, Draven taught Astrid the history she'd never been allowed to learn. The true story of the Moonshadow dynasty. How they'd ruled with wisdom and strength for 1,000 years. How the coup had come from within ambitious wolves who wanted power without the burden of responsibility. How a 7-year-old girl had supposedly died with her parents, but rumors whispered she'd escaped. That girl would be your great-great-grandmother, Draven said, showing her portraits in the sealed archive. Your bloodline survived by hiding, by marrying into common wolves, by accepting the lowest-ranked generation after generation. Astrid stared at the portrait of the last Moonshadow Queen. Golden hair, amber eyes, features that could have been her own reflection. They lived in fear for 500 years so I could exist. They survived so the truth could live. Draven's hand found hers, and now it does. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Astrid needed to shift, needed to access the power that was her birthright. They tried in the training grounds under moonlight. Draven couldn't shift himself. Vampires didn't have that ability, but Thalia coached her patient and encouraging. Stop thinking, the hybrid healer said. Stop trying to control it. Just let go. Astrid closed her eyes, reached deep inside herself, past the years of learned helplessness, past the Omega conditioning, past the fear, and found nothing. Or rather, found a wall. Something inside her so deeply suppressed, it might as well not exist. I can't, she gasped, opening her eyes. Frustration tight in her throat, but refusing to cry. Not again, not when they had so little time. Thalia's expression was gentle. 22 years of being told you are powerless. That's not undone in 3 days. But we only have... I know. The healer touched her shoulder. We'll keep trying. On the 2nd day of training, Kael brought worse news. Scouts confirm Elder Cornelius met with Damon in the Blackwood Forest. The room went silent. Cornelius, Draven repeated something dark and terrible dawning in his ancient mind. He's been on the council for 40 years. He would have been young during the last generation. Old enough to remember. The coup, Thalia breathed. Mother of wolves, he was part of it. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Cornelius hadn't just helped hide Astrid as an Omega 15 years ago. He'd been part of the original conspiracy that eliminated the Moonshadow dynasty. And when a 7-year-old heir survived when she appeared in the Dominion as a frightened child, he'd made sure she stayed powerless. Hidden in plain sight, monitored, controlled. He's been watching me my whole life, Astrid said, her voice hollow, making sure I never awakened. And now that you're close to the truth, he's helping Damon finish what they started 5 centuries ago. Draven's hands clenched into fists. Eliminate the last Moonshadow heir. That night, unable to sleep, Astrid found Draven in his private study. He looked up from the documents he was reviewing, and something in her expression made him set them aside. I'm afraid, she admitted, of everything, of Damon, of what I'm supposed to be, of this. She touched the mate mark on her throat. I don't know how to be what everyone needs me to be. Draven crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. Cool skin against warm. Vampire and wolf. 2 souls that shouldn't fit but did. Then don't be what they need. Be what you are. And what's that, mine? He kissed her, not tentative or gentle, but claiming. Their connection ignited between them like wildfire, and Astrid gasped against his mouth as need primal and undeniable consumed her. This wasn't the careful touches in the tower. This wasn't the comforting embrace after tears. This was recognition, completion, the bond demanding to be sealed. Draven, she breathed. I know. He carried her to his chambers, and they came together with desperate intensity. The mate bond completing itself fully as he worshipped every scar the silver rope had left on her wrists, every bruise from her imprisonment, every mark of the cruelty she'd endured. His touch was reverent and claiming and healing all at once. Vampire cool against werewolf warmth, ancient power meeting hidden royalty. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the darkness, the bond hummed between them. Complete, unbreakable, eternal. Mine, he whispered against her throat. Yours, she answered. Always. For a few precious hours, they existed in a bubble where nothing else mattered. No murders, no politics, no looming threats. Just them. The bubble shattered with Kael's urgent knock at dawn. My king, scout reports. Urgent. Draven cursed reluctantly, pulling away from Astrid to dress. Minutes later, they stood in the war room as a young vampire scout delivered his report, words tumbling over each other in panic. Damon's been spotted in the Blackwood Forest, meeting with banished wolves, the ones exiled for using forbidden magic. And there's someone else with him, a woman. She's performing rituals. Draven's blood ran cold. What kind of rituals? Blood magic, my king. Old magic. The kind that was forbidden after the Great War. The scout hesitated, fear clear on his young face. Sir, the lunar eclipse is in 3 days. Whatever they're planning, it's tied to that. Talia burst into the war room carrying an ancient text she'd found in the restricted archives. Her hybrid eyes were wide with fear. I know what he's doing. She slammed the book open on the table. It's a binding ritual. It turns pack members into feral beasts bound to the caster's will. Mindless, obedient, violent. Kael leaned over the text, reading. During the lunar eclipse, the barriers between conscious mind and wolf instinct are thinnest. If Damon completes this ritual with a powerful enough witch, he'll have an instant army, Draven finished, his voice deadly quiet. Wolves who can't resist his commands, who'll attack anyone he designates as enemy. How do we counter it? Astrid asked, stepping forward despite her fear. Thalia's eyes shifted to her. You need an alpha powerful enough to break the binding. Someone whose alpha command can override the dark magic. The current council alphas won't be strong enough, Kael said. The binding uses blood sacrifice and eclipse power. It would take someone from the original bloodline. Someone like me, Astrid whispered. The weight of understanding settled over the room like a shroud. But I've never shifted, Astrid said, the words steady despite the terror beneath them. How can I? We have 3 days, Thalia said gently. I'll teach you everything I can. On the 3rd day, the sun struggled to break through gray clouds. The lunar eclipse would begin at moonrise. They had hours, not days. Astrid stood in the training ground, exhaustion written in every line of her body. She'd barely slept, barely eaten. Again, Thalia said. Astrid closed her eyes, reached deep, found the wall and tried to push through. Nothing. I can't. The words tore from her throat. I've tried everything. It won't. I can't. She sank to her knees in the dirt. 3 days of failure. 3 days of feeling the weight of everyone's expectations, knowing that tonight lives would depend on her, and she couldn't access the one thing that might save them. Draven knelt beside her, pulling her against him. It's all right. It's not all right. People are going to die because I'm too weak. You're not weak. His voice was fierce. You've survived things that would have broken warriors 3 times your age. You've held on to yourself despite everything they did to strip it away. That's not weakness, Astrid. That's strength beyond measure. But I can't shift. I can't be what they need. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Her voice broke. Draven cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. If you can't shift, then I'll fight for both of us. If the binding takes the pack, we'll run. I'll take you somewhere safe, somewhere Damon can't reach. Your dominion means nothing without you. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. You'd give up everything. I'd give up eternity itself if it meant keeping you safe. Their connection flared between them, golden and warm and unbreakable. And in that moment, Astrid understood. She'd been trying to shift for the wrong reasons. For duty, for others' expectations, for some abstract idea of what she should be. But the wolf inside her didn't care about should. It cared about survival, protection, love. It cared about him. As sunset approached, Draven assembled his forces. Every vampire loyal to him. Every wolf who had voted to keep him in power. It wasn't enough, not against an army of feral wolves bound to dark magic, but it was what they had. Astrid stood beside him in the war room, studying the maps, the strategies, knowing that in hours everything would change. Thalia approached quietly. My lady, I need to tell you something about the binding magic. What is it? The hybrid healer's expression was grave. The ritual requires a sacrifice, a death to fuel the binding. Damon will have killed someone tonight to power it. Astrid's stomach dropped. Who? I don't know, but someone died to make this possible. Another life lost to Damon's ambition. Another innocent destroyed. Astrid's hands clenched into fists. We stop him. Whatever it takes. Draven turned from the maps, his amber eyes finding hers. In 3 centuries, he'd faced countless battles, endless threats, but he'd never fought for something that mattered this much. The sun's setting, Kale announced. The eclipse will begin within the hour. This was it. Draven crossed to Astrid, taking her hands. Whatever happens out there, know this. You are the strongest person I've ever known. Shifting or not, alpha or not. You are everything. She rose on her toes, kissing him, pouring every ounce of love and fear and determination into it. When they pulled apart, her eyes blazed with something fierce. Let's end this. The moon rose red, blood red, like a wound torn in the sky. Astrid felt it the moment the first rays of the eclipse touched the earth, a wrongness that made her skin crawl, that set every instinct screaming danger. Beside her, Draven stiffened. It's starting. The screams began seconds later. Throughout the Dominion, wolves began shifting involuntarily, but these weren't natural shifts. These were violent force, their eyes going blank and feral as the binding magic took hold. Elder Cornelius lunged at his own grandson, fangs bared. Warriors who'd served Draven for years turned on each other with mindless savagery. Mothers attacked their children. The dark magic had taken hold. Restrain them! Draven roared, his vampire power rolling through his voice. Don't kill. They're not in control. His loyal vampires and the few wolves who'd resisted the binding fought desperately to subdue their possessed packmates without lethal force. But more kept turning, the Blood Moon's power spreading like plague. Then Damon appeared at the gates, an army of banished wolves at his back, and behind him a cloaked woman whose hands crackled with dark energy. The witch, Morgana Blackthorn, exiled 50 years ago for forbidden magic, returned to finish what she'd started. Damon's voice carried across the chaos, triumphant and cruel. Hello, cousin. His eyes found Draven. Thank you for making this so easy. Your precious mate can watch you die before she joins you. Astrid's hands trembled. She had no shift, no power, no way to help. But she had survived 22 years of cruelty by being smarter, faster, more determined than anyone expected. And she wasn't done surviving yet. The battle began, and Moon Hollow Dominion burned red beneath the bleeding moon. It was carnage. Feral wolves attacked anything that moved, their eyes blank and glowing with unnatural light. Friends tore at friends. Families destroyed each other. The binding magic had stripped away everything human, everything conscious, leaving only mindless beasts driven by Morgana's dark will. Draven fought with brutal efficiency, his vampire speed allowing him to disarm and disable rather than kill. But there were too many. For every wolf he subdued, 3 more turned feral. Kale fought back to back with Thalia, both of them trying desperately to protect the children who had so far resisted the magic. The hybrid healer wielded silver chains, wrapping them around feral wolves to contain them without lethal force. But they were losing ground. Damon's banished army poured through the gates like a flood of teeth and claws. These wolves had no loyalty, no mercy. They came to kill, and they did it with savage efficiency. Astrid stood frozen in the chaos, watching her world burn. She had no shift, no power, nothing but the silver dagger Draven had given her for protection and a determination that had kept her alive for 22 years. It wasn't enough. A feral wolf lunged at her, jaws wide. Astrid dodged barely, the beast's claws raking across her arm. Pain exploded through her, but she didn't stop moving. Couldn't stop. She ran. Not away from the battle, but toward it. Toward where Draven fought, surrounded by enemies, his vampire power blazing like dark fire. Draven, she screamed. He turned, and in that moment of distraction, 3 feral wolves dragged him down. Fangs sinking into his shoulder, his leg, his side. Vampire blood, dark and thick, stained the ground. No! Astrid's scream tore from somewhere primal, somewhere deep. She threw herself at the wolf's silver dagger flashing. She wasn't trained, wasn't strong, but she was desperate, and desperation made her fast. She drove the blade into one wolf's shoulder. It yelped, releasing Draven, stumbling back. Then Damon was there, massive in his wolf form, brown fur matted with blood. He slammed into Astrid with bone-shattering force, sending her flying. She hit the ground hard, the dagger skittering from her grip. Damon shifted back to human, standing over her with that same silver blade that had killed Isolde. His eyes were wild, triumphant, utterly mad. Did you really think you could win? He pressed the blade against her chest, right over her heart. You're just an Omega playing dress up. I am the true power here. I've planned this for years. Blood trickled from Astrid's mouth where she'd bitten her tongue in the fall. Why, Isolde was your sister. Isolde was a fool. Damon's face twisted with rage and old pain. She found your bloodline records and wanted to reveal the truth. Make you alpha, as if some hidden omega deserved what I'd worked for my entire life. So I killed her, framed you. You'd be executed, the secret buried, and I'd challenge the vampire during his grief. His eyes gleamed with madness. But you survived. So now I take everything by force. He raised the blade. Through the mate bond, Astrid felt Draven's anguish. Felt him trying to reach her, held back by feral wolves. Felt his life force weakening from too many wounds, too much blood loss. He was dying, and she was about to die. And Damon would win. No. The word echoed in her mind and her soul, in every cell of her body. No, no, no. Rage, unlike anything she had ever known, erupted inside her. Not rage at Damon, not rage at her circumstances. Rage at every injustice, every beating, every moment of being told she was worthless. Every life lost to this system of cruelty and lies. And beneath the rage, something else. Love. For Draven fighting with the last of his strength to reach her. For Isolde who had died trying to give her truth. For every Omega who had suffered in silence. For herself, the girl who had survived. The woman who refused to break. The wolf inside her didn't just emerge. It exploded. The shift was instantaneous, powered by pure fury and love and desperation. Bones reformed in a heartbeat. Muscles expanded. Senses sharpened to impossible clarity. And when it finished, when Astrid stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life, she was magnificent. Massive. Nearly as large as Damon in his wolf form, her fur the color of moonlight itself. Pure silver that seemed to glow with inner light. The mark of the Moonshadow dynasty. The mark of true royalty. Astrid's wolf threw Damon off with a sound between a howl and a roar. He scrambled backward, eyes wide with genuine fear for the first time. She didn't give him time to recover. Alpha command, raw and absolute, rippled from her like a shockwave. Stop! The word wasn't spoken. It was commanded, willed into existence with 500 years of royal bloodline power behind it. The feral wolves froze mid-attack. The binding magic shattered like glass. Throughout the Dominion wolves, who had been mindless beasts moments ago, suddenly came back to themselves. They collapsed, whimpering, confused their minds their own again. Morgana screamed as her spell backlashed. Dark energy consumed her from within, and she fled into the forest, power broken, defeated. The banished wolves, seeing their advantage disappear, scattered like shadows. And in the sudden ringing silence, Astrid's silver wolf stood in the center of the battlefield, radiating dominance that couldn't be denied. Every wolf in Moonhollow, feral or free, friend or foe, dropped to the ground, submitted, because they recognized what she was. Not just Alpha, the true heir. The rightful ruler returned. Damon shifted back to human, scrambling away on hands and knees. Blood streamed from claw marks Astrid didn't remember making. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by raw terror. Please, he gasped. Please, it wasn't. Astrid shifted back to human, standing, naked and powerful in the moonlight. Someone, Talia, maybe threw a cloak over her shoulders. But Astrid's attention never left Damon. She walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate, measured. Draven limped to her side, vampire healing already working on his wounds. He said nothing, just stood with her. Support without interference. Partnership. Why did you really kill her? Astrid asked quietly. The truth, Damon. You owe her that much. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer, then something in him broke. She was loved, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Isolde was everything I wasn't. Kind, gentle, perfect. Father adored her. Mother doted on her, and me, I was the weak beta, the embarrassment. Father beat me for not being strong enough, fast enough, good enough. His hands trembled. I worked so hard, became a warrior, earned respect, clawed my way to power, and then Isolde finds you, wants to give you everything, and I couldn't bear it. She was my sister, Damon sobbed. I loved her, but I hated her too. Astrid stood over him, this broken man who had killed his own sister, who had tried to destroy an entire dominion, who had nearly succeeded. She could kill him, tear his throat out the way he'd torn Isolde's, make him suffer the way he'd made others suffer. The old Astrid, the Omega who had been beaten and starved and told she was worthless, wanted that, craved that revenge. But she wasn't that girl anymore. I forgive you, she said quietly, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let your cruelty make me cruel. Damon's eyes went wide. What? Isolde loved you, she tried to help you, and you killed her for it. Astrid's voice broke. But keeping that cycle of pain going, that's not justice. That's just more pain. You're going to let me live. No. Astrid's hands moved faster than thought, trained by 3 days with Thalia, guided by instinct. Clean break. Quick. Painless. Damon's neck snapped and he slumped forward, dead before he hit the ground. Mercy and justice combined. Astrid stood, her legs shaking, and Draven caught her, held her while she cried. Not for Damon, but for everything this night had cost. For Isolde. For the innocent who had died to fuel the ritual. For the wolves who would wake tomorrow with blood on their hands and no memory of how it got there. It's over, Draven murmured against her hair. You did it. You saved everyone. But it wasn't quite over yet. Elder Cornelius stood at the edge of the battlefield, his silver council robes stained with dirt and ash. He had fought with the feral wolves protected by Morgana's magic. But now, with the spell broken and Damon dead, he stood exposed. Astrid turned to face him, and the old wolf's expression shifted from arrogance to something like fear. Cornelius Blackwood, Draven's voice rang with authority. You stand accused of conspiracy in the murder of Isolde Thornfield, participation in the coup that destroyed the Moonshadow dynasty, and attempted genocide of the true royal line. Cornelius drew himself up, trying to project dignity. I did what was necessary. You murdered children, Astrid said quietly. The entire assembly fell silent to hear her. My family, you slaughtered them in their beds and called it necessary. The Moonshadows were failing. You wanted power, Draven cut him off. Don't dress it up in noble purpose. Talia stepped forward, her hybrid eyes blazing. Including the historian last week, the 7 Omegas who worked in the archives, the countless others who got too close to the truth. The gathered wolves, still reeling from the broken binding, murmured in shock. What do you demand, Alpha? One of the council members asked, addressing Astrid for the first time with her proper title. Astrid looked at Cornelius, this man who had haunted her entire life, who had killed her family, who had kept her powerless and afraid. She could demand death. The old laws would support it. But she had just killed Damon, and one death tonight was enough. Exile, she said firmly. Strip him of rank and title. Remove him from the Dominion. Let him live powerless and afraid with nothing. Cornelius's face drained of color. Please no. Death would be kinder. I'm not offering kindness, Astrid said. I'm offering mercy. There's a difference. The council voted. Unanimous. Cornelius Blackwood was escorted from the Dominion at sword point, and Astrid watched him go without satisfaction. Just a bone-deep weariness. She had won, but victory tasted like ash and tears. 3 weeks passed before the coronation. The wounded recovered. The dead were mourned. The Dominion slowly pieced itself back together. Astrid spent those weeks learning. Thalia taught her to control her shift, to access her alpha power at will. Kale trained her in combat, patiently working through her inexperience. And Draven taught her to lead. You don't command respect by demanding it, he said. You earn it by being worthy of it. The coronation was held at dawn when both sun and moon shared the sky, symbolic of the new rule vampire and werewolf, truly equal for the first time. Astrid stood before the assembly wearing robes of pure silver that caught the light like moonbeams, honoring the bloodline everyone thought was lost. The crowd parted as she walked toward the raised platform where Draven waited. Halfway there, her foot caught on the ornate fabric. She stumbled forward and the crowd gasped. Draven caught her smoothly, one arm around her waist, steadying her with a small smile that only she could see. Still learning to be graceful, she whispered. You stopped an execution blade with your neck, he murmured back. Grace is overrated. Talia, promoted to High Elder, anointed them both with ritual oils. The ancient words echoed through the courtyard. But when Astrid placed her hand over her heart and spoke her oath, she added new words. I vow to lead with truth and mercy, to protect the powerless and give voice to the voiceless, to ensure no wolf is ever condemned without evidence, tortured without trial, or silenced because of their rank. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. I establish the Truth Council. I decree that all accusations require proof, that all wolves deserve defense, and that rank does not determine worth. Former Omegas in the crowd straightened, tears streaming down their faces. The designation of Omega is abolished. Astrid continued, her voice ringing clear. There are no lesser wolves, only pack. The roar of approval shook the ancient stones. Draven placed the crown on her head. Not Cornelius's old crown, but a new one forged from Moonshadow silver. Delicate yet strong, beautiful yet practical, like her. Co-rulers, Thalia announced, united in power, united in purpose, united in bond. The pack howled their acceptance, and the sound was like thunder rolling across the Dominion. That evening, they ran the traditional bonding hunt through the forest under the stars. Astrid's silver wolf moved with growing confidence. Draven ran beside her in his bat-form shadow, and Moonlight racing together. They ended on the cliff overlooking the Dominion as dawn painted the sky in rose and gold. Draven pulled her against his chest, both of them watching their world wake below. In the training grounds, former Omegas practiced shifting. In the council chambers, truth investigators reviewed old cases. Smoke rose from breakfast fires as families emerged to begin a new day. "Did you ever imagine this?" Draven asked softly. Astrid was quiet for a moment, remembering the execution, the blade 1 inch from her throat. The certainty that her voice didn't matter, that she was powerless, that she would die unheard. "I couldn't imagine being heard," she said finally. "Now I'm teaching others to use their voice." "You're changing everything. We're changing everything." He kissed her deep and claiming, and when they pulled apart, the sun had fully risen. Below, an 80-year-old she-wolf completed her first shift and wept with joy. A young Omega saved from an arranged mating joined the Truth Council. Mixed-blood children were welcomed openly. The real work was just beginning. There would be resistance, setbacks, wolves who clung to the old ways. But standing here with Draven's hand in hers, wearing silver instead of chains, Astrid felt something she'd never experienced before. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of survival, but the powerful, determined hope of someone who had found her voice and refused to ever be silenced again. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Isolde's death, the entire Dominion gathered for remembrance. Astrid stood before the memorial garden, Draven at her side. Isolde's grave was marked by a silver rosebush carefully tended. Isolde Thornfield died because she believed in truth. Astrid said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. She saw worth in someone the world called worthless. She gave her life so we could have this. Freedom, voice, choice. She placed a silver rose on the memorial. We honor her by living the way she wanted us to live. With courage, with kindness, with the certainty that every soul matters. One by one, wolves came forward, placing flowers, sharing memories, crying openly. That night, alone in their private chambers, Astrid stood at the window overlooking the Dominion. Draven wrapped his arms around her from behind. Tired, exhausted, terrified, overwhelmed, she leaned back into him, but also happy. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their world sleep below. Peaceful now, but it wouldn't always be. There would be more challenges, more threats, more moments of doubt. But she had Draven, had Thalia and Kael, had a pack learning to trust her, had herself, the strength she'd discovered, the voice she'd found. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too." The blade had stopped 1 inch from her throat, and that 1 inch had changed everything. Not just for Astrid, not just for Draven, but for every soul in Moonhollow Dominion who had ever been told they didn't matter. Astrid Moonshadow the Omega, who survived the Alpha, who forgave the woman who changed everything, smiled in the darkness. Because she had learned the most important truth of all. You don't have to be born powerful to be strong. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. And you don't have to be what others tell you to be. You just have to be brave enough to become who you truly are. The blade had stopped, and she had just begun.